Adam, welcome to the show. It's a dream come true to have you here, and you're one of the reasons that I began this podcast. So really happy to have you here.
Kiki, I'm honored. I'm really truly honored, and you saying that to me, it feels good. I'm not going to lie, it feels good. And there's so many people that have inspired me on my journey, and I'm happy to give back. And I'm honored to be on your show today. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I'm really interested to understand your journey. I know that you've tried multiple avenues before you have finally found the purpose of your life. And I want to understand how did all of this begin, your entire journey? Tell us more about yourself.
Yeah, I mean the journey is interesting, and it's been long, and it's been 20 plus years. And my background, really quick. When I was in university, I always knew that I was going to get into business and marketing, and advertising really attracted me. This was the year 2000. We didn't have the social media that we did now. There was still a lot of the romance around the traditional advertising industry. There was still the really true creative element to it, and it drew me towards that. So after university, I went right into advertising and marketing, and I spent 15 years in that field, working in account management, digital strategy, social strategy. I worked at various ad agencies in New York City, spent time at Sirius XM satellite radio, was there for about 5 years, and I really learned direct-to-consumer marketing, e-commerce marketing, so expanding my skill set. And then I decided to make, my time was kind of up there, as we like to say, and I made a move over to American Express, this giant global credit card company. And for me, that was a real culture shock. It was the most corporate job that I've ever had, and it was there that I realized that I am not the type of person that thrives in a corporate environment. It's too much structure, too much process for me. I need a little bit more creativity. So I decided to leave, and I went back to the world of advertising. I landed at a smaller shop. And during that time, Gary Vaynerchuk and VaynerMedia started to come into my attention as an emerging agency. And Gary was not a household name back in 2013, 2014. People didn't know him like they do now, but I did. And luckily for me, one of my buddies worked early on with Gary, and I was able to get an introduction. I was able to interview, but I was the one who earned that job there. And I landed the job at Vayner. And Kiki, I really thought that the grass was going to be greener on the other side. I thought it was going to be the perfect job for me. But quickly into the role, I soon found out that it wasn't. And I think that's an important lesson for people to understand, that not everything works out the way you imagine it. Not everything works out the way you dream it to be. And ultimately, I lost my job there. I did not do what they hired me to do. And I take a lot of responsibility for that. I take a lot of, that was on me, and I needed to own my loss. And that was a really tough time for me in my life, because when I lost my job, I knew I had to do something different. I knew that I couldn't go back to advertising. It was just not in my heart anymore. I didn't feel it. I didn't have the same passion. But I also knew that I needed to do something that still kind of tied into that, so I didn't have to start at zero. Now, don't get me wrong. I love marketing. I love media. I love social media. But what really called me, and that was the time I really had to dig down deep and figure out what was next.
Right. So you did a lot of soul searching before taking the next step. But at what point did you think that you wanted to start a podcast? Was it always on your mind?
I mean, so let's, I mean, we're skipping a whole chapter in the book here. So after my time at Vayner, I made the move into recruiting, and that was not without a lot of thought and really due diligence. And before I got into recruiting, I spoke to so many different recruiters. I had many different interviews, and I chose the path of recruiting. Fast forward, I started a search firm. I learned how to be a recruiter. And then 3.5 years ago, I went out and I decided to launch my own search firm. It was at that time, about 2 years ago, where I kind of was listening around, and I was hearing a lot of podcasts out there. And there was a couple things missing. I didn't see somebody really digging into the career stories. I didn't see anybody really digging into those career journeys well. And I've always had this kind of idea and passion that I could be a broadcaster. I could be a radio host. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to go for it. Just like you did. I said, you know what? I'm going to give it a shot. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And now fast forward, 2 years later, almost, 13,000 subscribers and 140 plus shows. It's been an absolute incredible journey for me, for the listeners, and just a tremendous amount of personal growth for me.
Yeah, and I'm so proud to say that I'm a huge fan of that show, and I follow it regularly. So I'm going to link it in the description for our viewers as well, so that they can go and check it out. But one thing that I want to understand is, when we do a podcast, or when you start your own firm, it's like putting yourself out there, right? So it can come with a lot of challenges. So what were the challenges that you faced along the way? Did you feel like you had figured yourself out, or did you always feel like an imposter?
This is a great question. I love this question. I don't think I've had an opportunity to really dig in and answer that.
Mm-hmm.
The journey of the podcast for me has been one of a lot of self-discovery.
Right.
Being able to find my voice, being able to feel comfortable sharing an opinion. Because I think it's important for a podcast host to really balance showcasing the guest, but also having your own opinion. Because your audience is following the show, not just for the great guests that you have, but they're following you for what you have to say, for your
Exactly.
conversation, for your point of view. So that took me a little bit of time to feel comfortable. I'll be honest with you. I don't want this to come out sounding the wrong way, but I don't think I've ever faced imposter syndrome because I feel I am at where I need to be because I earned it. Every step of my life and my journey has gotten me to this point. So I don't look at it as, hey, oh, I don't belong to be here. I shouldn't have this success. It's like, no, I earned this success. My intention was to get to this point, and every step of the way I took to get here. Every client that I've earned, everything I've done for the show, it's all been on me. No one's handed it to me. No one say you don't deserve it. It was all me on that. So imposter syndrome is real. A lot of people do face it, and I do respect that, but I don't think that's something that I've faced.
That's a very interesting perspective, and I'm glad that you said it, because I think a lot of times, even though we might not admit it, imposter syndrome just becomes an excuse to not find yourself. Even though we might think that it's really good and I cannot find myself, but it just gets us into that negative zone, and then we simply cannot come outside of it because we think that now it's not possible.
We call that, just to kind of riff on that a little bit, we call that a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that's happened to me many times in my life when I think something it's going to happen, good or bad. And usually it's a negative connotation on a self-fulfilling prophecy, but you kind of have that defeatist syndrome and you're already talking yourself into losing. So that's a big mindset shift as well.
Yeah. So I want to understand, if anyone is really having imposter syndrome, how do they get over this self-doubt that is always there, right? You try something new, you are vulnerable, and then you don't think it'll work out, and you're putting in everything. Sometimes you don't see the results immediately. So at that time, to be consistent and to be patient till you get your first win, it can be very hard. So how do you think someone can overcome that feeling of self-doubt, which is in the constant battle that we fight?
Yeah, I think it's important to celebrate your wins. And I think it's important to look back and look at your accomplishments. And they don't always have to be the biggest, fireworks wins, the biggest clients, the biggest things. Micro victories, small things, small wins. Look at those and you'll see a pattern of success. And there's always going to be those failures and speed bumps. No one's perfect. Yeah. And you have to learn from those mistakes. And if you can't learn from those mistakes, you need to stop, pause, and really have that moment of introspection and say, okay, what I do wrong here? What am I going to learn from it? And if you can't learn from it, you're never going to grow. And that's something even deeper to dig into.
Right. So when we start our personal branding journeys, introspection is the key, that we have to do it at every stage. So how can someone introspect every action of theirs in the true sense?
For me, it's just on a day-by-day basis. I think it's about being mindful and intentional about your work, about your relationships. And I think it's also important to be able to look back. To look back and see how far you've come. But at the same time, don't look back too long. Don't dwell on it. Don't spend too much time thinking about it. But what that will do is put things in perspective. If I look back and say, all right, look where I was a year ago. I was recording this show in a conference room in a WeWork. And now a year later, I built out the studio that I've always dreamed about. I have all this new equipment that I've invested in because I've been successful. I care about the show. I care about the product that I'm delivering. That's success for me. I could look at this microphone and be like, look, I have 3 microphones that I've had during this show. I started with my Blue Yeti, which is like an intro mic. And then I upgraded to my Samsung, which is a fantastic microphone. And then I got this one, which is the top of the line. And I'm looking at that as a very tangible measure of success for me.
Yeah.
Because if my show wasn't successful, I would never buy this mic. I mean, I'm talking about little things like that. I've always had these headphones though, because I love them. I haven't changed my headphones.
I can totally relate to it, because when I started, I think my first video was of such pathetic quality, and I was just stammering throughout it, and I was having so many pauses. And then over the episodes, I got a mic, and then I got a webcam, and then I had all of the setup. I still don't have the studio.
Right.
It's on the
you don't need the studio. But you look at those little wins. I mean, life is all about upgrading too, and it's good to reward yourself. It's good to build your. Think about any craftsman, any you start as an apprentice, and maybe you only have a hammer and a couple of nails. And then by the time you're, 25 years into your career, you have such a collection of tools and equipment and all these things that you earned. And that's part of success and growing as a professional, and having the right tools and be able to use them the right way.
Absolutely. I think gratitude combined with introspection and then looking ahead, all of these three, when you
100%.
combine them together, I think you can find yourself. And one thing that really gets difficult today is the irony of choices, right? Because we have so many choices to look at. We have someone saying that you should do a podcast, someone saying that you should maybe go open a YouTube channel. So there are so many things that are coming up, but you never know what to follow. So how do you think people can find their purpose when they are surrounded by so many choices, and how can they really find that inner voice and understand what their calling is?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think it's a lot of experimentation. I think you also have to be mindful. I think it starts off with being mindful about who you listen to and who you take advice from.
Exactly.
I kind of stick to the rule that I only take advice from people who are at where I aspire to be and who have been in my shoes before. Because there's lots of people out there that are always unsolicited advice. People are always wanting to tell you something.
Yeah.
But you look back and like you've never had a podcast before. You're telling me how to do something. Now that's important, because if they're coming to you from the perspective of a listener, someone who's an avid listener, and they're giving you advice, you 100% listen to that.
Yeah, that's
But if they're telling you something else, you're like, okay, well, have you done this before? Have you built a recruitment agency? Have you done that before? So I think it's important to be mindful about who you take advice from. But finding the passion, I mean, that's inside all of us. And it's really interesting. Passion is a tough one, because there's some passions that are achievable, and you just have to be realistic with them. And, listen, like if I said to you, hey, I'd love to be an astronaut and go to space, that's never going to happen for me. Let's be realistic. Right. But if I say I want to be a top 10 podcast host, that is realistic, and I'm making the steps to get there. Right. You have to follow what's in your heart. We only have one life. So I always tell people to really go for it, but just be realistic, be pragmatic. If you are supporting your family, I'm not telling you to quit your job tomorrow and go all in on podcasting. Try it out, sample it, see if you like it first. Lots of people think they could do this podcasting. I mean, as well, like it's a lot of work. It's a lot. They only see the front. They only see that final podcast. They only hear that final podcast. They don't see all the work that goes into it. They don't see all the scheduling. They don't see all the production, all the research that goes into it. And then they try to do it, and they're like, damn, like I didn't realize how much work this is.
Exactly. And they just do it because it's really cool to have a podcast, especially during the pandemic. I think this is the message that we get, that if you have time, just get a podcast done. But if you don't think about what the why of your podcast is, or what is it that you're going to specifically concentrate on, it becomes really difficult, because if you're not passionate about it, it's going to burn you out.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting too. I mean, you talk about that. I mean, it was a couple of years ago when, all the experts and gurus were telling everybody that they needed to write a book. Everyone should write a book. You should do that. And people told me I should write a book. And I'm like, I have no interest in writing a book. And it's kind of the same thing with podcasting too. And they think, all right, well, if you want to generate business, if you want to generate leads, if you want to build a personal brand, you need to have a podcast. And I don't think that's right, because I don't think everybody is meant to have a podcast. The same way, I don't think everyone's meant to write a book.
Exactly.
If you don't feel it in your heart and you don't have a passion for it, it's going to totally sound like that to anybody listening. Like I hear it in your voice when you talk, when you set up this show, when I hear your energy and I hear your excitement. You love doing this. You're excited about it. You want to do it. I mean, look at that smile right now. Like you're enjoying this conversation. You're enjoying the art of creating a podcast. It's so funny too. I'll tell you a quick little story. It was a few months back, and we were one of our COVID outings. We were at a beach with friends. Very safe. We were, outside on the water and everything. And one of my friends was playing guitar, and he's just an amazing guitar player. And I look over at him. I'm like, dude, you're amazing. You're an amazing artist. I was like, I wish I could do that. I have no talent. I have no creative talent. And he stops playing and he looks over at me and he goes, dude, I've listened to your show. I can never do that. I can never get on the microphone with random people and have a conversation like that and drive it forward. He goes, that is your art. Yeah. And that made me really think for a moment and be like, wow, I mean, like I have a skill. I have a creative outlet. And that really was a moment for me where things started to click in. I said, all right, let's keep going at this podcast thing.
Absolutely. There's this feedback like this that can really keep you going, and you know that you've taken the right direction. But you can have different channels to realize your craft. at the end of the day, you really have to do that soul searching yourself. No one can do it for you, but you can do it yourself
100%.
to figure out what is the channel through which you want to do it and what is it that you're interested in, not just because people are telling you to do so, but because you really want to do it, right? And
100%.
that becomes a really, really intimidating task when people are starting their personal brands, especially when they're thinking beyond their work, because most of the professionals are so engrossed in their work that their entire identity is just tied to it. And so to come out of it and to think what are the other things that they're interested in and what are the other things in which they can really give back to the community can be really difficult. And along the way, I think there are also these points where you feel so low, you don't see that things are working out, and you feel like giving up. So how do you think we can inculcate the mindset of resilience within us?
This is a tough one, and the word that I use all the time, anybody who follows me, is this word tenacity. I think resilience and tenacity they go hand in hand here.
Yeah.
Resilience is the ability to bounce back. Resilience is the protective shell that we all have to insulate ourselves and protect us and our emotions and our feelings, and our passions. That's resilience. Resilience is being strong, being able to come back from a failure, being able to push forward. And the tenacity is the fire. The tenacity is that inside in that engine inside of you that keeps you going every day.
Yeah.
That pushes you harder and harder and harder. Now, I think all of us have that fire inside of us. We all have that tenacity. And there's times when it gets bigger and brighter and when we need it. And there's times when it doesn't. The hard part are for the ability for folks to find that tenacity when they need it, to be able to light that fire when it's most important. And I always say, for me, the other piece of the equation is when I need to light that fire and I need some inspiration, I look to my North Stars. What's my compass? What guides me? Which leads me forward? My magnet, which is my family, my wife, and my kids. So whenever I look and I'm down and something's not going well, I said, all right, I need to push forward. I need to push through. If I have a difficult client, if I have a difficult obstacle in front of me, you know what? I'm doing this for them. And that lights the fire inside of me to drive me forward to be the best I could be.
Right. So you think everyone can just hold on to their anchor and take some time to reset and then come back and give their best again?
Yes. And I urge people, if they can't find it, to look to what drives them and is most important in life and their why. Why am I doing this? Who am I doing this for? And sometimes it's you. Not everybody has family. Not everybody has loved ones. I mean, let's just be realistic about it.
Yeah.
So if you love yourself and you want to see yourself do the best first and foremost, then harness that for yourself.
If there's one advice that you would want to give to anyone who's getting started and still trying to find themselves, what would that be?
Always be true to yourself. Don't try to copy other people. Don't try to emulate somebody else. Don't try to be like Gary Vee. Don't try to be like Grant Cardone. Don't try to be like this person. Just be yourself. And it'll resonate with some, and it may not resonate with others. But at the end of the day, you will know that you're being authentic and real to your true self. And I always say this, it is so difficult to try to be somebody you're not. It is so difficult to try to keep up a facade. It's exhausting. It takes a lot of work. You have to live the lies. You have to make up all this crap and BS and everything and not be true. But when you're true to yourself and you're true to your content and you're true to your calling, it just comes natural and you never have to worry about it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for agreeing to this interview, Adam. It really means a lot, and this is one of the highlight episodes of the series because I started with the dream of hosting you, and it's finally done. So I'm going to put a lot of my heart and soul into the editing of this episode and really make sure that everyone gets to see this.
Kiki, I truly, I appreciate you. I could see, feel, and hear your passion. And I wish you all the luck in the world. And I also want to tell you that I'm here as a resource for you. If you have questions about podcasting, anything to do, just, you have my email, you know where to reach out. And to all your followers out there, stick with her. She's a great host and she's got a bright future.
Thank you so much.